Skoda's first volume production full electric car, the Enyaq iV, uses Volkswagen Group EV technology to good effect. Based around the Wolfsburg conglomerate's advanced MEB electrified platform, it sets new standards for the brand in terms of quality, but the old attributes of value and practicality remain. Take cost, range and space into account, and this is a difficult package to better in the segment for mid-sized crossover EVs.
As a brand, Skoda has had to get serious about EVs. Well, this is serious, the Enyaq iV, one of the most significant new models that the Czech maker has introduced since it was established way back in 1895. We're told that it's been designed from the ground up by the brand to deliver a completely new driving experience. Inevitably, the reality is a bit different. Under this sharply suited skin, this is merely Skoda's take on the 5-door, upper mid-sized crossover EV design, also sold by the VW Group's other marques. Volkswagen has it as the ID.4, Audi has it as the Q4 e-tron, and CUPRA as the Born. Yet, even so, there are lots of reasons for interest here. The Enyaq is yet another Skoda that pushes the brand up market. There's even an alternative swept-back coupe version of this 5-door SUV body style to emphasise the point. In this standard form, it's easily the most affordable of the quartet of Wolfsburg-financed EVs we just mentioned, and interestingly, if you happen to be a follower of the Czech maker, it marks a return to the rear-mounted powertrain and rear-wheel drive design layout not seen on Skodas since the infamous budget models of the 60s and 70s. It's also the only VW Group EV not built in Germany and the only one assembled in a factory that still makes combustion models. Equally significant perhaps is the fact that the VW Group hierarchy was so impressed by Skoda's interpretation of this upper mid-sized EV design that the brand has been appointed to lead development of the conglomerate's new city car sized electric vehicle. But then Skoda has always had an eye for electric car design. Its first one, the Laurent and Clement E, brainchild of engineer and inventor František Krajcik, dates right back to 1908, although that was actually a hybrid with a 28 PS petrol engine generating drive electricity. But full electric Skodas were to follow. A compact truck in the late 30s, the favourite-based Ultra 151L model for the Swiss market in 81, the Octavia Green E-Line development model in 2011, and finally Skoda's first production EV, the short-lived Citigo e-iV of 2020. So full battery power is nothing new to this Czech maker, but it will be to most of its customers, and that's why so much effort has been made here to help ease them into the brave new world of electrified mobility. The designers have held back on some of the slightly futuristic exterior and cabin styling cues that you will find on some of the EVs in this class, and there are all the usual Skoda Simply Clever practical touches to make ownership that little bit easier. Less familiar is the dispensing of the usual trim hierarchy. Instead, there are different interior design selections which are each supposed to better reflect a likely customer's wants and needs. Lots to talk about then, and an awful lot to brief you on, with this car campaigning in what is currently the most closely fought segment of the rapidly expanding EV market. To understand it fully, you're going to need Car and Driving's Road Test, the industry's most comprehensive product video review. So let's get to it. So, the first Skoda of a new era. What's it going to be like to drive? Let's find out. Get comfortable, and it's all as normal as a Czech brand could make it. No galloping graphics, no melody of bings and bongs, just an image of the car on the instrument screen ahead of you, together with battery charge and range, which changes to a digital speedo with a green ready message when you put your foot on the brake here. There is a starter button, and that's down on the steering column, but you don't really need that because sensors in the seat register your presence, and that allows you to push the little drive selector into D, at which point, to the accompaniment of a deep chime, the electronic parking brake automatically disengages as you ease away. Yes, that's right, you ease away in this EV rather than needing to moderate the kind of frantic forward thrust that seems more normal in an electric vehicle these days. That doesn't really suit any two-ton SUV, and it certainly wouldn't suit an Enyaq IV, the relaxed drive dynamics of which, it's immediately clear, are geared towards lowering the heart rate rather than raising it, which of course maximises drive range, and that's quoted at between 256 and 326 miles, depending on the variant you select, so more on that later. Now, the name Enyaq is apparently derived from the Irish word Enya, meaning source of life. The source in this case being the same two-way choice of 62 and 82 kilowatt-hour battery packs, which power the mainstream versions of all the other mid-sized VW Group EV crossovers using this conglomerate's bespoke MEB electrified platform. That rather dilutes the effect of the innovative vehicle tag, which is what the IV part of the car's name stands for, as does the fact that there's no one-pedal drive option here. That's a currently fashionable engineering attribute in this segment, and it allows the maximisation of regenerative braking to an extent that off throttle the car slows so dramatically that you hardly ever have to use the actual brake pedal. You don't get that here, even if your Enyaq has the steering wheel paddles that you'll usually find on the car in this segment, which alter regenerative energy harvesting, which it very well may not have, because these cost extra on the volume Enyaq IV 60 variant, the 62 kilowatt-hour model that we're trying today, and the version that most customers will choose, of course, because it's the only one that qualifies for the available government plug-in car grant. You will get those paddles as standard on the much pricier but longer running Enyaq IV80 model with its bigger 82 kilowatt-hour battery, but we don't have them here, so in this case the only way of accelerating the brake energy harvesting process is to click the little gear lever from D into the alternative B setting. What all that energy drives in most cases with this Skoda is an electric motor on the rear axle, developing 180 PS in the Enyaq IV60, but boosted to 204 PS in the Enyaq IV80 to cope with the bigger battery's extra weight. That additional bulk cancels out any significant performance gain for the pricier model, and that reaches the 62 miles an hour benchmark only a couple of tenths faster than the time recorded for this 60 series version. That's quoted at 8.4 seconds. The pulling power torque figure, 310 Newton meters, is the same either way. As is the 99 miles an hour top speed, which, like this car's primary rear-wheel drive design layout, might put you in mind of budget Skoda models of the 60s and 70s. Only if you happen to have a very un-Skoda-like budget for this kind of EV can you match this model's theoretical crossover genre with SUV-style four-wheel drive. That's created slightly artificially, as usual on any expensive electric vehicle, by the simple expedient of placing an extra electric motor on the undriven axle, in this case at the front. That not only gives you more traction, but of course more power, 256 PS in the Enyaq IV80X Sportline variant, or 299 PS with the top Enyaq IV VRS hot hatch model. To be honest, we can't really see why you would. Suburbia, not Silverstone, is this Skoda Enyaq's natural habitat, and you're not encouraged to use the throttle very much with this car anyway. You've got to get beyond a nasty click point if you go much beyond the 3/4 level of pedal travel. It is in suburbia that you'll most readily realise the advantages that mainstream Enyaq models gain from having the powertrain, the electric motor and the associated single-speed automatic gearbox mounted on the back axle, and that's primarily because this frees up the front wheels for steering duties, which is why the turning circle is a London taxi-like 10.2 metres, and that's better even than the brand's very first EV, the tiny Citigo E IV City car. As a result, this SUV is superbly manoeuvrable for its size, jinking through traffic hold-ups and dashing into spaces. As with other electric vehicles, this one's town travel is characterised by its need to constantly emit a strange E sound, which is intended to warn pedestrians of its impending approach. You do wonder why it's necessary for this feature to sound so otherworldly. I mean, other brands use film composers to create rather more pleasant melodies. The rear-driven format also benefits the Skoda beyond the city limits. It allows a near 50-50 virtually perfect weight distribution, which, together with the low centre of gravity produced by the central battery pack placement, helps to disguise those extra battery kilos. Traction through the turns is excellent, although there is a touch more body roll than you get with the alternative Volkswagen, CUPRA and Audi versions of this VW Group design. The payoff for that, though, is a much better standard of ride with suppleness over poor surfaces and speed humps, which is unbettered in this class and is far superior to most rivals. Dynamic chassis control, adaptive damping is optional, but to be frank, you don't really need it. Not so good is the rather anaesthetised level of steering feedback. You can't do anything about this unless you pay extra for one of the extra cost drive packages, which allow you to add in a couple of options. One is a progressive steering setup, which uses variable steering rack and pinion gearing to give you more direct responses to larger steering angles. And the other is drive mode selection, settings to alter throttle feel and steering feedback, which would normally be a given for a car of this kind. If you have drive mode selection, there's a choice of eco, comfort and sport settings, plus an individual menu too, via which you can select your own parameters. It is another thing actually that we don't have here, and to be honest, we really haven't missed it. Perhaps more useful are the various semi-autonomous drive features that these days you'd expect from a car of this kind, and which, sure enough, do feature here at extra cost. This car has been engineered for the option of the VW Group's travel assist setup. That's a camera and radar sensor controlled assistance system. Now that will autonomously accelerate, brake and steer your Enyaq IV while maintaining a safe distance to the vehicles ahead of you. Otherwise though, there's really nothing very sophisticated on the options list in this regard by current standards, just adaptive cruise control and traffic jam assist. That's a system that can basically take over the acceleration, steering and braking duties from you in slow stop-start traffic. Town travel of that sort is great for boosting the driving range figures we mentioned earlier on, which you'll probably want to know a bit more about. Skoda claims a 256-mile range from their 62 kWh Enyaq IV60 variant, and as much as 331 miles from the bigger battery Enyaq IV80 82 kWh version. It's 303 miles for the dual motor 256 PS Enyaq IV80X Sportline variant. In our time testing this mainstream 60 series derivative, we've been reasonably impressed by how close the car's been able to get to the official figures, although in order to regularly crest the 200-mile barrier between charges, you'll need to be spending quite a lot of time in town or with a notably restrained right foot. And either way, it helps enormously if you do remember to frequently engage the transmission's regenerative B mode that we mentioned earlier on. At higher speeds, when you'll dispense with the regenerative harvesting, you'll notice wind and tyre noise, but only really because there's no engine note to mask them. That's something that you might find a little strange if you're unfamiliar with the whole EV experience, but it won't be very long before it'll feel as normal as this Enyaq tries to be in an increasingly abnormal world. Creating an electric vehicle that's forward-thinking without being rather irritatingly futuristic is harder than it sounds, but Skoda has managed it here. We're told that the look of this car is bold, futuristic, and immediately recognisable as a Skoda. Well, that rather depends on what you expect Skoda to be. It's safe to say that until quite recently, this isn't the kind of thing you'd expect to find in one of the Czech makers' showrooms. We're now in a new era though, one enthusiastically embraced here by Oliver Stefani's design team, who set out to create a powerfully elegant, full electric family SUV. It certainly makes a statement here at the front. Now, a grille may be unnecessary to cool an EV, but modern automotive design looks ugly without it. And with this hexagonal appendage flanked by angular LED headlights, Skoda's gone all out. There's a sculpted chrome frame, lots of crystalline elements and numerous vertical slats which here look rather too obviously blanked off, but with the crystal face option selected it can illuminate with 130 LED light strips to produce an effect that's rather unkindly likened by one writer to the teeth on a Halloween skeleton costume. We actually think it looks rather distinctive. Other frontal features include the way that this dramatically raked windscreen here flows into this prominent central bonnet crease, and further down a lower air intake with hexagonal detailing is flanked at the bumper's outer corners by narrow outlet slits. It's from the side that you realise the Enyaq is a larger, slightly more upmarket thing than say a Nissan Leaf or a Kia e-Niro. The near 4.7 metre length positions it closer in size to Skoda's spacious Octavia, and the wheels, between 19 and 21 inches in size, the largest ever fitted as standard to a Skoda, remind you that this is the VW Group's Czech alternative to an ID4, not an ID3. The high shoulder line starts with this trim strip above the front wheel arch, and there are blacked out B, C and D pillars. Subtle roof rails and black lower body cladding panels attempt to emphasise the crossover vibe, plus there's a long rear overhang and you get pronounced concave indentations in the lower door panels which attempt to give the flank some shape. A bit like its cousin, the Audi Q4 e-tron, this Skoda is available both in this conventional form and also with a separate body style offering a slightly sportier silhouette. In that sportback style, it's called the Enyaq Coupe. A closer glance at the rear reveals why the more swept back option was needed. This conventional version would look quite practical and boxy if it were not for the way that this tailgate's framed by this matte black roof spoiler. The slim LED tail lamps are linked by Skoda block lettering, and lower down the rear bumper features slim red reflectors. More important as usual is what you can't see, namely the Modulare Antriebsbaukasten or MEB platform, which translates from the German as child's building set. This, sure enough, represents the building block basis for a host of VW Group and Ford EVs that we'll be seeing over the next few years. And of more direct interest here is that it's shared in this segment not only by the Volkswagen ID4 but also by the CUPRA Born and the Audi Q4 e-tron. Enough with the outside, let's take a look in the cabin, which will be nothing like anything you'll ever have experienced in a Skoda before, either in terms of quality or design. This Czech maker's cabins have in the past often been just about as interesting as daytime TV, but this one is different. For a start, you're left pleasantly confused as to exactly what kind of car this is. That's thanks to the way that the slightly raised seating height of a crossover has been somehow combined with a windscreen which pushes so far forward that you'd think you were in a big MPV. Then there's the dashboard that's unusually contoured in a series of layers with textile finished soft plastic at the top, giving way to a midsection trimmed either in fabric with the loft, lodge and lounge design selection of themes, or as here in lovely cognac brown stitched leather. That's with the pricier Suite and Eco Suite packages. Just below, as a finishing touch, there's a shiny chrome-edged trim panel that curves around the fascia here and which can illuminate with ambient lighting. It's all really very upmarket, yet combustion engine converts will feel instantly at home with none of the rather weird and rather futuristic trimming and design flourishes that are found in this segment with cars like Ford's Mustang Mach-E, or indeed that closely related Volkswagen ID4 model we just mentioned. Well, almost none anyway. This two-spoke wheel looks rather strange, but the knurled silver barrels that feature on it, on the spokes, are classy, or at least they would be if they were better fitted. A reminder that this is an EV comes with the big open area below the lower centre console here. In a combustion engine model, this lower space would of course be filled with the linkages between the mechanical gear shift and the transmission. Otherwise, once you've worked out that the start button is hidden here on the steering column and that the transmission is marshalled by this tiny button here between the seats, your first impressions of this cabin are really going to be centered around its screen technology. Now, the Enyaq IV ignores the current trend for portrait central displays, but this 13-inch landscape orientated monitor is still fashionably big. Nor, thankfully, has Skoda been tempted to follow the Tesla trend for mounting driving instruments onto this. These sit instead in a conventionally binnacled colour screen that you view through this steering wheel here. We'll start with that. It's clear and simple. The Enyaq car graphic gives way to a digital speedo once you're ready to get underway, with time, temperature and speed limit displays at the top of the screen and battery and range readouts at the bottom. Gear selection intrudes from the right when you need to see it, while this button on the right wheel spoke here extends out a section from the left that can show cruise control and drive assistance graphics. As is the norm these days, that accompanying central touchscreen has inhaled most of the secondary controls, although up to 8 physical buttons are provided for in the mid part of the centre stack. One of them is badged Climber, and it offers quick access into ventilation functions which would otherwise be rather awkward to quickly find within the menus of the monitor here. Plus, you can alter temperature easily using icons that are constantly shown on the lower part of the screen. Rather more fiddly is the volume slider just below. This is a feature that someone in VW Group Design presumably likes, but everyone else actively hates. It's created in the days before we all had to slather our hands up with hand sanitizer every 5 minutes. If your hands are gunged up or you're wearing gloves, you'll be pleased to find that this is one of those screens that you don't actually always have to touch. Just hovering your finger near what you want is often enough to activate that feature. Like most modern monitors, this one's capacity for over-the-air updates will allow the brand to continually improve it. And as usual with displays of this sort, your home screen can either be split between several key functions, or it can be composed of rows of little icons like a smartphone. There are, of course, all the usual navigation, DAB+ radio and Bluetooth features, all displayed with super sharp graphics, plus Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring. That's accessible through Skoda SmartLink. The voice control setup, which can converse in up to 15 different languages, works pretty well too. It allows you to do things like adjust the temperature, play your favourite song, make or receive a call, or give directions, although it can't adjust the drive modes if your Enyaq is fitted with them. Otherwise, pretty much anything else you might want is accessible once you wake the system up with the words, "OK Laura."
How can I help?
We referenced cabin quality earlier. To us, the materials seem nicer and classier than those you'd find in a pricier Volkswagen ID4, and mostly everything seems to have been well screwed together by the Czech Mladá Boleslav factory. The seats are as good as they look too, generously proportioned and supportive with standard lumbar adjustment. There are some lovely touches too, like the preset Skoda summer, winter, ocean, race and individual settings for the background lighting, and the smart section of the climate ventilation system, which gives you useful presets for warming and cooling functions like warm my feet, warm my hands and cool my feet. Not everything's perfect, of course. Frontward visibility can sometimes be compromised by these long, shallow angled front A-pillars, and the rear pillars, they don't do much for your over-the-shoulder view either. That might be an issue for those 60 series customers who refuse to pay extra for the rather unfortunately optional rear view camera. Rear parking sensors do make the team sheet though across the board. You'd think this vast dashboard could swallow just about anything, but apparently not, because opening the glove box reveals a pull-out compartment that's halved in size for reasons that Skoda's designers haven't troubled us with. Compensation, though, comes not only with the vast open 11.4 litre area below the lower centre console that we mentioned earlier on, but also with the deep carpeted door bins, plus this big 6.2 litre stowage box between the seats, which is capped with a height adjustable ratcheting stitched lid and incorporates a pull-out tray and an illuminated interior with an elasticated sidewall strap. In addition, there's a deep well at the base of the centre stack with 2 USB-C ports and space for the optional phone charging mat. Just behind lie a couple of cup holders, although if you take the central divider out, this becomes another compartment. Another narrow cubby runs alongside the drive selector, and there are coin slots by the electronic handbrake. There's also a ticket clip in the driver's sun visor and another on the A-pillar. That last item is trumpeted as one of Skoda's simply clever features, most of which, to be honest, aren't very remarkable, and many of which are actually optional. And being simply clever doesn't apparently extend to providing something as basic as an overhead compartment in which to store your sunglasses, or in fact drawers beneath the front seats. It does though get you something that you would otherwise only find on a Rolls-Royce. And that is an umbrella concealed within the driver's door, only visible when you open the door. So let's head rearwards and check out what's in store for those on the back seat. Get settled in back here, and as usual in a Skoda, you'll find legroom that's difficult to better in the segment. 2 6-footers could sit comfortably behind a couple of front seat occupants of the same size. This is also a wider cabin than you might expect a mid-sized SUV to be able to provide, and with no central transmission tunnel here to obstruct things, 3 adults could actually fit reasonably easily into the back of this car. There's certainly the headroom for that, provided the model in question hasn't been optioned up with the panoramic glass sunroof, which lowers the ceiling a few vital millimetres. This bench doesn't either slide or recline as it would in a Karoq or a Kodiaq, or indeed in the EV market in a rival BMW iX3, but otherwise it's all good with an airy feel, even if you don't specify that glass roof, thanks to these rear quarter lights here. There's a reasonable amount of storage provision, including compact door bins, along with map pockets and pockets for mobile phones. Those are both stitched into the backs of the front seats. Coat hooks feature on the B-pillars and in the grab handles, plus you get individual overhead lights, central vents with a storage cubby and pop-out cup holders, along with a pen clip in this central armrest here. These twin central USB-C ports cost extra, as do these useful pull-up side window blinds. Plus you can add heated seats, extra soft headrests and tri-zone climate controls back here. We're going to finish with a look at the boot, which by the way you'll have to use for all significant cargo storage, because unlike some other rival EVs in this class, there's no extra luggage room in the nose of the car. That's taken up by the air conditioning system and the power electrics for the driveline. On the way to the very back, we'll check out this charging flap. A reeled up tethered extendable charging cable would have been a really lovely, simply clever touch here, but we'll have to wait for that. And by the way, this is an area which, unlike on a combustion model, doesn't incorporate the usual Skoda ice scraper and tyre tread measuring slab of plastic. But don't worry, once you raise the tailgate, you'll discover it's been secreted instead into the left inner side right here. You will have to raise it yourself unless you've paid extra for the powered virtual pedal tailgate. Once everything's raised up here at the back, a big 585 litre space is revealed. That's 42 litres more than you'll get in an ID4 and a massive 183 litres more than you'll get in the Ford Mustang Mach-E. It's also 64 litres bigger than the trunk of the kind of Skoda Karoq that many Enyaq customers might otherwise have chosen, despite the presence of an electric motor under the floor here, which eliminates the possibility of having the usual underfloor central storage area, or of course, any kind of spare wheel. You do though get this deep narrow well beneath the cargo base's leading edge, into which the charging leads can just about be stored, but that can be annoying when you need to get to those cables and the boot's all full of luggage, hence our irritation that there's no stowage area beneath the bonnet. Only one charging lead, by the way, that's the one for your wall box, and the public charging is supplied as standard. Appallingly, on an EV of this price, you'll have to pay extra for one that you'll occasionally need with a 3-pin socket. There is a reasonably high lip to lump your stuff over, and annoyingly a variable height boot floor costs extra, although at least one is available, unlike on the ID4. The recycled cargo bay base carpet feels cheap and abrasive, but once you get your items in, the space provided is square and usable, with wide recesses capped by removable plastic panels on either side, so things like golf club bags will more easily fit. Up to 9 carry-on suitcases could be accommodated here, 2 more than you get in that rival Ford Mustang Mach-E. There are bag hooks just inside the tailgate. There are pull-down hooks on either side, the usual floor tie-down points, useful lights that shine down from the inside of the tailgate, and there's a 12-volt socket on the right. The rear bench doesn't split flexibly 40-20-40 like it does in, say, the BMW iX3 we mentioned earlier, but Skoda does at least provide a ski hatch, so longer items can be poked through into the cabin. Annoyingly, what you don't get, unless you pay extra, are catches to release the rear seat backs, so flattening the rear bench is rather more of a faff than it really should be. Once the rear bench is retracted, there's up to 1,710 litres of capacity up to roof height. You'd have trouble though sliding heavy items all the way back because the cargo base is heavily stepped. There's no fold flat front passenger seat option, which would enable you to carry a longer item like a surfboard, so those will have to go on the roof. That, when it's equipped with the appropriate cross rails, can take up to 75 kilos of load. At first glance, the pricing story with this Enyaq IV looks quite good. A Volkswagen ID4 or Ford Mustang Mach-E sized family EV for not much more than the price of decently spec'd Nissan Leaf or Volkswagen ID3 sized one. Better still, the volume versions of this Skoda qualify for a government grant towards purchase, which is rare for an EV of this size, and they do so without limiting you to a restrictive battery size and a feeble electric motor output, so it's all good, provided you don't mind spending on the extras that Skoda has had to delete in order to get the base model price down beneath the £35,000 barrier, beyond which the current £2,500 government plug-in car grant is unavailable. Let's give you a quick rundown on how things work with Enyaq acquisition. Like the car itself, it's not completely conventional, although the range structure is fairly straightforward. It's primarily based around 2 rear-driven powertrain combinations. Now, so that they can qualify for the government grant, the vast majority of customers opt for this base Enyaq IV60 model, which has a 62 kilowatt-hour battery paired with a 180 PS motor on the back axle, and from launch was priced from just over £32,000 after grant deduction. Beyond the scope of the grant lie the alternative Enyaq IV80 models, priced from around £40,000. Yes, that is a bit of a big price jump, isn't it? Which use a larger 82 kilowatt-hour battery paired with a gutsier 204 PS motor. Still, if you do stretch to an Enyaq IV80 variant, you are rewarded with the additional option of an all-wheel drive version with an extra motor at the front, and that creates a total output of at least 256 PS. Although, as we'll see in a moment, an all-wheel drive Enyaq will be quite a pricey option. Let's drill down a little deeper into how Enyaq acquisition works across the range. Choose the standard Enyaq IV60 or Enyaq IV80 models, and it's important to know that all the base price gets you is poverty spec loft cabin trim, which lacks a number of the key items you're probably going to want. So you'll almost certainly be spending more. Now, how much more depends rather on your choice between 4 available interior trim packages. Skoda calls them design selections. The first one, Lodge, isn't too pricey at just £500 more or so, but the other 3 require bigger slabs of cash. Lounge at just over £1,100 more, Suite, which is what we have here, at just over £1,300 more, and Top Eco Suite at just under £1,600 more. Don't worry though, even if you spec up an Enyaq IV60 like a Christmas tree, it'll still qualify for the government grant. If you happen to need the longer range of the Enyaq IV80 model, you can't be bothered with all those trim choices, and you want this Skoda to have a sportier look, then your dealer will direct you to the 2 available IV80 Sportline models, available either in rear-driven guise from around £43,000 or for around £3,500 more in more powerful all-wheel drive form. If you can push your spend up even closer towards the £50,000 mark, then there's a top performance-orientated Enyaq IV VRS variant. That hot hatch EV is only available with the all-wheel drive system, and it borrows its powertrain from the rival Volkswagen ID.4 GTX, which offers a total 299 PS output. Before you decide on any sort of Enyaq, by the way, make sure that you really do want an EV. For the price of an Enyaq IV60 model like this one, you could also have an even more spacious but similarly sized Skoda Octavia estate in IV plug-in form with mid-range spec and a 34-mile all-electric driving range. And for about £1,500 less than the price of an Enyaq IV80, you could have a much larger Skoda Superb estate, again in mid-range plug-in form and with a 35-mile all-electric range. But you're probably looking at an Enyaq because it is a full EV you're after. So how do other similarly sized segment rivals compare in terms of this Skoda's value proposition? Well, let's look at that now. The most obvious competitor is Volkswagen's ID.4, which shares all its engineering with this Skoda, but the only version of one of those that's priced low enough to qualify for the government grant has a restricted range 52 kilowatt-hour battery mated to a 148 PS electric motor, a package that VW's chosen not to offer in the UK. If you're looking at the larger battery Enyaq IV80, the equivalent Volkswagen ID.4 with a 77 kilowatt-hour battery and a 204 PS motor costs nearly £3,000 more. Also predictably pricier are the other two VW Group models that share the same basic design, the CUPRA Born and the Audi Q4 e-tron. A base Q4 35 e-tron, for example, which has a much lower driving range than an Enyaq IV60, costs nearly £8,000 more than this Skoda, with grant deduction taken into account. And the Q4 40 e-tron, the drivetrain spec of which is the same as that of the Enyaq IV80, costs around £7,000 more. So you've really got to want the Audi badge to pay that. So this Skoda sees off its VW Group design cousins fairly easily in the value stakes, but how will its pricing and value proposition compare to similarly sized EV crossovers from other brands? Well, we've taken a look at that for you too. Here again, Enyaq pricing looks strong. After all, the £32,000 budget attached to this basic Enyaq IV60 model is usually only enough to get a smaller EV like the BMW i3, the Kia e-Niro, the Nissan Leaf in E-Plus form, and a better spec version of the Volkswagen ID.3. You need a budget necessary for a larger battery Enyaq IV80, just under £40,000, if you were going to consider more comparable contenders in the class like Nissan's Ariya and Tesla's Model Y, although the latter does have the unique in-segment option of 7 seats. Move up to the £40,000 to £45,000 price point and you open up access to a whole series of other similarly sized EV rivals: the Volvo XC40 Recharge Pure Electric, the Mercedes EQA, and the standard range single motor versions of the Polestar 2, the Tesla Model 3 and the Ford Mustang Mach-E all sit in that price bracket, and they're all comfortably outdone in terms of driving range by a cheaper Enyaq IV80. The Lexus UX300e also sits in the same segment, but that's not so tempting because its 54.3 kilowatt-hour battery will only take you up to 186 miles. We think the best match against the bigger battery version of this Skoda is the Polestar 2 in long-range single-motor 78 kilowatt-hour battery form, but even that, at around £43,000 at the time of this test, is around £4,000 more than an Enyaq IV80. You need to budget closer to £50,000, so nearly £10,000 more for comparable long-range versions of the Tesla Model 3 and the Ford Mustang Mach-E. If you can push your budget up to around £60,000, then you could also consider the BMW iX3, which has an 80 kilowatt-hour battery. But by that point, you'll be getting into the kind of price territory which could see you start to consider a slightly larger EV crossover like a Jaguar E-Pace, an Audi e-tron, and the Mercedes EQC. After considering all those options, it's very possible you might conclude there's nothing quite like an Enyaq IV in this segment, in which case you'll want to know exactly how generous Skoda has been with the specification here. So time to have a look at that right now. Now we'll start with a few irritations, namely that whatever price you're expecting to have to pay for your Enyaq of choice, you'll have to add around £50–100 more to it. And that's because the asking figure doesn't include the Type 2 3-pin connector charging cable that you'll need for those occasions when you have to plug into a domestic 3-pin socket. That's £645 more, nor does it include the £340 extra that's necessary to boost the fairly feeble 50 kilowatt charging capacity of this Enyaq IV60 to the 100 kilowatt level that'll allow you to properly use the new generation of super fast public chargers. And unless you happen to want this Skoda in the only standard paint colour, solid energy blue, you'll be paying at least £595 more for your choice of metallic or pearl paint colour too. We've got race blue metallic here, incidentally. With that out of the way, let's get to the features that all Enyaqs do share. So there are full LED headlamps, LED tail lights, auto headlamps and wipers, rear parking sensors, power folding mirrors and black roof rails. Plus, to meet EU law, this car, like all EVs, has an exterior e-sound feature which emits a futuristic noise under 12 miles an hour to warn pedestrians of its impending arrival. The IV60 variant gets 19-inch Proteus wheels too. Depending on the state of the storage area at the very top of your house, you might not have very high hopes of the tally, which is included with the standard loft cabin spec, but actually it's not too bad at all. In this form, all Enyaqs feature a virtual cockpit instrument screen, an air care climatronic 2-zone air conditioning system, a leather trimmed and multifunction steering wheel. There's also an auto dimming rear view mirror. There's cruise control with a speed limiter. There's fabric and artificial leather upholstery, a front center armrest, lumbar support for the front seats and LED ambient lighting. Also standard across the range is the big 13-inch touchscreen infotainment display in the centre, which gives you a whole range of media features which can be accessed either by touch or via Skoda's LoRa natural voice control system. That central monitor features a DAB+ tuner, Bluetooth and Skoda's wireless smart link setup, which gives you Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring. Plus, of course, there's an app. There's always an app, isn't there? This one's called Skoda Connect, and as usual with an EV, it's of the sort that can preheat or cool the car and set charging times. Plus, the app helps you to find and use over 150,000 public charge points, and it works with a single charging card that you can use right across Europe. And it includes access to Ioniti's high-speed charging stations along major highways. Also included are online traffic information services, and using the app you can do things like remotely lock or unlock the car, you can flash its lights to help you find it in a car park, you can browse your Enyaq's service history and check whether the charging cable's connected. If it is, you can start or stop charging sessions from your sofa. To get going with all of this, you simply download the free application, you set up a user account and you add your Skoda and then activate a Skoda Connect contract, at which point the functions all become available for 3 years. What if you want to stretch to an Enyaq IV80 variant with a larger 82 kilowatt hour battery? Well, as well as the extra driving range and the more powerful motor, that extra spend gets you the ability to alter the drive demeanour of the Skoda quite a lot. A drive mode select system allows you to alter steering and throttle response, and steering wheel paddles allow you to alter the level of brake regeneration, basically the amount that the car slows and harvests energy when you come off the throttle. Enyaq IV80 models are also set apart from the 60 variants by the use of chrome for the roof rails and window surrounds and a different Regulus design of 19-inch alloy wheels. Plus you get front parking sensors and the rear view camera. Whether you choose an Enyaq IV60 or an IV80 variant, it is, as we said earlier, highly likely that you're going to want to stretch up beyond the base loft level of cabin trim, which does look a bit Spartan actually, and choose from one of the extra cost design selection packages we talked about earlier. The Lodge package gets seat upholstery featuring 40% wool and 60% polyester from recycled plastic bottles. Next up is the Lounge package. That's characterised by a suede-like microfiber cabin finish with matching stitching and fabric door inserts. If you want a more luxurious leather vibe, then you'll be directed to the suite package we have here, which gives you leather upholstery with stitching and piping in cognac brown with piano black decor and artificial leather door inserts. The final option is the Eco Suite package. Now that ecologically tans its cognac brown leather upholstery with the extract of olive tree leaves rather than with chemicals. There are also contrasting details in stone beige and matching leatherette for the door inserts. If you want to go further and get yourself an Enyaq IV80 variant with Sportline trim, you'll get a more dynamic exterior look courtesy of 20-inch Vega anthracite metallic alloy wheels, sports bumpers and intelligent matrix beam headlights, while inside there's carbon effect decor and upholstery in an Alcantara leather combination, which also features on the dash. There are also aluminium look pedal covers and a special 3-spoke sports steering wheel. The all-wheel drive ATX Sportline model also gets as standard the uprated 125 kilowatt charging capacity, which costs extra on all the other 80 models and which can't be had at all with the 60 series variants. Finally, there's the all-wheel drive only VRS variant with a powerful 299 PS output. This top performance model replicates most of the elements of ATX Sportline spec, but it has a look set apart by unique 20-inch alloy wheels, a lower body height and a bespoke body styling kit. Plus, there's also an additional traction driving mode profile. Right, enough with standard spec and interior design packages, onto options, and we'll start as usual with the most important ones. Now, if we were choosing this Enyaq IV60 model, having spent the extra £1,500 or so necessary to get the essential extra features that we mentioned earlier on, the Type 2 3-pin connecting cable, the 100 kilowatt charging capacity upgrade and the metallic paint, if any extra budget was left, we'd first want to get ourselves one of the drive packages, which will give you 2 key driving tools for this Skoda. Drive mode selection, which gives you different settings to alter throttle response and steering feel, and paddles for brake recuperation. That allows you to vary the level of brake regeneration. To be frank, all of this really ought to be standard as it is on most rivals, but it was probably sacrificed in order to get the Enyaq IV60 model's price low enough to qualify for the government grant. Drive Package Basic gives you the modes and the regen paddles. Drive Sport Package Basic also adds a progressive steering setup which uses variable steering rack and pinion gearing to give more direct responses to larger steering angles. And finally, Drive Sport Package Plus adds in dynamic chassis control adaptive damping too. Another thing that you'd ideally need on this car is a transport package, because that's what you have to get catches to release the rear bench from the boot, and the useful variable height boot floor. Plus, this pack also throws in boot area netting. We would also ideally want the optional heat pump for the battery pack, which preserves driving range in really cold temperatures, although Skoda wants just over £1,000 more for that. So depending on where you live, you'll have to weigh up whether the marginal range improvement that this feature will occasionally bring will be worth the really considerable extra expense of installing it. Beyond that, we'd probably be looking first at one of the family packages. We have the Family Package Basic option here, which gives you manual blinds for the rear windows and also 2 USB-C ports in the back. An alternative Family Package Plus further adds in a sleep package with fold-out rear seat headrests and a blanket, plus fold-out tables attached to the front seat backs. Okay, so that's all the essential stuff. What if you want to touch more technology though? Well, provided you've avoided the base loft spec cabin finish, you can specify an Infotainment Package Plus, which gets you a head-up display. There is also the Light and View Package Basic. That gets you intelligent matrix beam headlights with variable light distribution, plus variable lighting functions for the rear lights and headlamp washers. The 2 parking packages might also appeal. The Parking Package Basic adds in the missing rear view camera and the front parking sensors onto an Enyaq IV60 model. We've got that here. The Parking Package Plus adds an area view camera too. You might also want the helpful features in the two convenience packages. The Convenience Package Plus gets Enyaq IV60 customers 4 important features which are otherwise limited to the 80 series models: keyless entry, a wireless charging mat, acoustic side windows, and a driver alert system which prompts drowsy drivers. And on all Enyaqs you can specify the Convenience Package Plus. That further adds a powered tailgate with a virtual pedal kick action feature, so you can open that with a swipe of your foot just beneath the bumper. What if you want a touch more luxury? Well, for that your starting point will be one of the comfort seat packages. The Comfort Seat Basic package gets you power adjustability for the driver's seat with powered lumbar support and memory settings too. The Comfort Seat Package Plus, that further adds the same features for the front passenger seat, along with a massaging function for the driver's seat. You can also add a panoramic glass roof and also stiffer sport suspension on the 60 and the base 80 series models, although we don't really see why you'd want that with this car. Across the range there are also 2 climate packages available. Climate Package Basic, that gives you heat for the front seats and washer nozzles, plus tri-zone climate control with rear seat climate buttons. The Climate Package Plus, that adds rear seat heating and a heated windscreen too. As for aesthetics, well, the key feature here lies with the addition of Skoda's unique crystal face front grille, which illuminates this appendage with 130 LED light strips. You'll either like that look on this car or you'll really hate it. And this feature is only available with the matrix beam headlights we mentioned earlier as part of the Light and View Package Plus option. The fancy grille can't be had at all on this Enyaq IV60 model, but on this variant you can pay extra for the chrome package, which will give this car the silver roof rails and the silver window surrounds which characterise the bigger battery 80 series model. You might also want to look at the different 20 and 21-inch wheel styles available. We've got the optional 20-inch Vega silver metallic rims here. Paint colour, that's a subject we mentioned earlier. For nearly £1,000 more, there is a top-of-the-range exclusive shade of velvet red available. Finally, the practical stuff. We talked earlier about the need to pay extra for upgraded charging capability. Well, on the Enyaq IV80 rear-driven model, you can further upgrade to the ultra-fast 125 kilowatt charging capability that, as we mentioned earlier, features on the all-wheel drive variants. For the cargo area, a plastic boot dish, a partition net screen, a double-sided boot net, a ski bag and a double-sided boot floor, which enables you to turn the cargo base over for the transport of muddy boots or muddy dogs. For the cabin, you can add all-weather floor mats, a USB-C to USB-A port adapter, and various smart holders which can allow you to clip in things like tablets, hangers and hooks around the car. You can have the usual mud flaps, and there's an optional transverse roof rack which will allow you to take the available 400-litre roof box or the available holders for skis or snowboards. This is an EV that can tow too, although in most cases only up to about a tonne. If you want to test that out, Skoda offers preparation for a tow bar or an electrically retractable tow bar. If you hate handling filthy charging cables, Skoda sells you a cleaner for them and a charging cable bag. Let's finish, as we always do, with a look at safety. You'd expect some sort of forward collision warning autonomous braking system on a car of this kind these days. Skoda's is called Front Assist, and as usual with these sorts of setups, it scans the road ahead as you drive. If a potential collision hazard is detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond or you aren't able to, then the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. It incorporates swerve support, which stops you from turning into a junction in the path of another car. Plus, there's also dynamic road sign display, which pictures speed signs as you pass them and then displays them on the dash. Every Enyaq IV also gets a lane assist, lane keeping system, which warns you if you stray out of your lane and applies some gentle steering assistance to ease you back into it. All of this is in addition to all the more usual safety features that come fitted on every Skoda family model, which have together helped to justify this car's 5-star Euro NCAP safety test showing. There are twin front, side and curtain airbags, although disappointingly you don't get an extra one to protect the driver's knees. You do, though, get a clever centre airbag. That's a feature first introduced with the Volkswagen ID.3. In the event of a side impact or a rollover, this airbag can prevent the driver and front passenger from colliding with each other. There are, of course, ISOFIX child seat fastenings on the rear bench. It's also worth mentioning that one of the features of the Skoda Connect app we mentioned earlier is the emergency call eCall SOS system, which in the event of an accident where the airbags are triggered will automatically alert the rescue services with your exact GPS location. Other conventional safety features include the normal ESC stability control and ASR traction control systems, plus an ABS braking system, further assisted by CBC cornering brake control through the bends, plus an HBA hydraulic braking assistant, which helps to reduce stopping time when you really slam on all the anchors in an emergency. Plus, all Enyaq IVs get a hill hold function to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, plus tyre pressure monitoring. If you want more in terms of safety, you'll have to pay more. The Enyaq IV80 models get a standard driver alert feature which monitors your reactions for drowsiness and will, if necessary, prompt you to stop for a restorative coffee. As we mentioned earlier, you can add this into an IV60 model at extra cost as part of the optional convenience package basic. Otherwise, the real camera safety and drive assistance niceties are restricted to a couple of optional assisted drive packages. The assisted drive package basic option, that gets you adaptive cruise control, blind spot detection, which stops you from dangerously pulling out in front of other vehicles, and also crew protect assist, which just before an impact automatically closes the windows and pre-tensions the seat belts. If you want to go further, the Assisted Drive Package Plus option, that gets you 3 final features. Lane Assist Plus tracks road markings to help you steer through awkward traffic sections, emergency coned lanes, for example. There's also Emergency Assist, a setup which can take over driving duties completely if you become incapacitated. It steers the car to the side of the road and it brings it to a safe and gradual stop. And Traffic Jam Assist, which is the closest that this car gets to autonomous drive technology, and that's a system that can basically take over acceleration, steering and braking duties from you in slow stop-start traffic. We've not been especially impressed with the driving range figures delivered by this Skoda's identically engineered close VW Group cousins in this segment, the Volkswagen ID.4, the CUPRA Born and the Audi Q4 e-tron, but we are minded to be rather more positive about this Enyaq's capability in this regard, mainly because for the same or less than you'd pay for an entry-level version of those models, you can have this one instead with a much bigger battery. To give us some perspective on that, the only version of the Volkswagen which qualifies for the government's plug-in car grant, which at the time of this test in autumn 2021 was the life-trimmed 52 kilowatt-hour ID.4 model, can only take you 213 miles on each charge, a figure easily beaten by a super mini-sized EV like Renault Zoe. For the same money, a base Enyaq IV60 has a 62 kilowatt-hour battery, and that will take you up to 256 miles, which is far more like it. That's a good figure by class standards. Yes, you could do better by opting for the 64 kilowatt-hour versions of the Kia e-Niro and the Hyundai Kona Electric. In this form, the Kia costs about the same, while the Hyundai costs around £3,000 more, but both of those are significantly smaller, as is the Nissan Leaf E Plus, which also costs about the same and goes 239 miles between charges. But these are all really Volkswagen ID.3 sized rivals. Competitors more closely matched to this Enyaq IV60 size all struggle against this Czech contender in terms of range and value. Here we're thinking of EVs like the base 63 kilowatt-hour version of the Nissan Ariya, rated at 223 miles, and the standard range version of the Tesla Model Y, rated at 230 miles. And also the base version of the Hyundai Ioniq 5, which is 240 miles. For those last two, you're realistically looking at a £40,000 budget, and that's the kind of money which will get you the longer lasting Enyaq IV80 version of this Skoda with its 82 kilowatt-hour battery and 331 mile driving range. Again, that range looks good for the money against the competition. Pricey rivals in the £40,000 to £45,000 bracket include the Mercedes EQA, which has a 66 kilowatt-hour battery and manages 265 miles. The base Tesla Model 3, which is a standard range plus, 55 kilowatt-hour battery offering 278 miles. Also the base Polestar 2 standard range, that has a 64 kilowatt-hour battery and it returns 273 miles. A base Ford Mustang Mach-E with a 68 kilowatt-hour battery managing 280 miles. The Hyundai Ioniq 5 in 73 kilowatt-hour form, 298 miles, and the Kia EV6, 77 kilowatt-hour battery and 316 miles. Of course, if you'll merely be using this Skoda as a second car for mainly suburban duties, then the total range figure it ultimately delivers might not hugely matter. After all, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders tells us that 94% of UK journeys are less than 24 miles, although you'll need to bear in mind that, as with all EVs, the quoted range figure here could drop considerably in winter weather or over long motorway journeys. Whatever the range figure of the Enyaq IV model you select, it will, as ever with an EV, be heavily influenced by things like extreme temperatures, gradients, and of course the amount of weight being carried. But of course the major contributory factor will be driving style. You'll have to select the car's B regenerative braking setting provided by the gear selector. With this engaged, the electric motor functions as a generator and it feeds power back into the battery, and you'll experience stronger off-throttle retardation. If your Enyaq IV has the brand's drive mode select system fitted, you'll also need to frequently select that system's most frugal eco setting. If you don't use the Eco and B settings regularly, then the range figure drops quite a bit, but of course that's true of all EVs. We've been averaging around 200 miles of range from this 62 kilowatt-hour model on this test, which would suggest would be pretty typical, although in one instance with brisk driving and with the heater going, that dropped down to around 180 miles. In all circumstances, the car does at least do its best to help you out a bit. In really cold weather, you can in theory improve the quoted figures, or at least you can preserve them by specifying the optional energy efficient heat pump, which Skoda wants to charge you over £1,000 more for. Now this is supposed to save up to 4 kilowatt hours per 62 miles driven, which means that in winter, a heat pump equipped Enyaq would travel up to 30% further on every charge. We reckon you'd only make that investment back in increased mileage if you lived in an outlying area with regularly cold winters. What about the charging regime? Has charge been mastered here? Well, yes, to some extent. As we've said elsewhere in this film, it's annoying that Skoda has sought to save a few pennies by downgrading the charging capability of this base Enyaq IV60 model to 50 kilowatts. It'll cost you £340 to return it to the proper 100 kilowatt level, which will enable you to properly use the faster public charge points. That's a spend you'll really need to make before potential purchase, even if only to preserve your car's future residual value. The bigger battery Enyaq IV80 rear-driven models get 100 kilowatt DC charging capability as standard, and with those you can pay £340 more to upgrade to the 125 kilowatt DC charging capability, which you'll find on the top all-wheel drive variants. That allows you to use the new generation of ultra-fast public chargers. These really can't come soon enough for our market, updating a UK charging network that one Mercedes executive recently dismissed as a cowboy outfit. That's something that you'll really identify with if you live outside this country's major population centres. Skoda's done its best to help by providing its EV customers with a Skoda Connect app, which helps you to find and use over 150,000 public charge points. At a DC 100 kilowatt charging station, it'll take no more than around 34 minutes to recharge any kind of Enyaq IV with enough direct current to replenish the battery from 10 to 80%. Back at home, an AC one-phase 7.4 kilowatt wall box would replenish the 62 kilowatt hour Enyaq IV60 from 0 to full in about 9.5 hours. Think 12 hours 45 minutes for the 82 kilowatt hour variant, although with the larger battery model you can almost halve that time if your property or your business can support a gutsier AC3 11 kilowatt charger. At the other extreme, think in terms of needing to double the garage wall box charging time that we just quoted if you just connect up to a conventional 3-pin domestic plug. Remember that your home's cheap off-peak electricity allowance is likely to be no more than for around 6 hours, so it'll be important to use the Skoda Connect app's Smart Schedules feature, which enables you to program charging to take advantage of those lower rate tariffs. This also allows you to preheat or pre-cool the cabin, so you don't have to waste energy with the climate fan once you get underway. The charging plug is located on the driver's side rear wing, and a charging screen is accessed in the vehicle section of the centre dash display. There, a locations tab points to your nearest charging station, or there's a data section, and that offers selectable since start, long term and since charge sections. Each of those brief you on mileage, journey time and average speed, plus energy consumption and also current consumption in miles per kilowatt hour. So once you've got your charging regime sorted out, what does it all boil down to in terms of pounds, shillings and pence here? Well, at the time of this test, in autumn 2021, a full charge of the Enyaq IV80 from a typical electricity tariff cost £11.09. That's around 3 to 6 times cheaper than an equivalent car with either a petrol or diesel engine. Now, when we tested a comparable ID4, Volkswagen told us that it reckoned that a typical user would save around £730 a year in operating expenses over what they'd pay to run a comparable combustion engined model. We'd expect the savings with the Skoda to be around the same kind of order. What else? Well, you won't only be saving money on energy costs. Driving into congestion charge zones will be free, and you should also make savings in insurance and in road tax. More significantly, your company benefit in kind taxation rating will be pitched at 1%, which at the time of this test meant an annual payment from around £138 for higher rate 40% earners, or from around £69 for lower rated earners, which is massively less, of course, than you'd pay for a similarly sized and powered combustion engined model, even an electrified one. To give you some perspective on that, a conventional Skoda Karoq 2-litre TDI 150 PS diesel has a BIK rating of 29%. Even Skoda's supposedly super frugal Octavia IV PHEV, comparably priced to a base Enyaq, is rated at 7%. This Enyaq's 1% BIK rating, of course, is down to the fact that, like any EV, this one claims a zero-emission CO2 figure, although, of course, the energy to drive this car has to cause pollution somewhere. Government figures give this Skoda a well-to-wheels carbon contribution of 58 grams per kilometre. The Czech maker claims an efficiency rating of 4 miles per kilowatt hour, but we've got down as low as 2.8 miles per kilowatt hour at times during this test, averaging about 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour. Either way, this Skoda is some way from being completely green. Residual values look promising. The CAP Gold Book residual value for the Enyaq IV60 model we're trying today at 3 years and 60,000 miles is £16,325, which is very class competitive. You might be a bit shocked by the insurance groupings here if you're moving over from a combustion model though. Insurance groupings are high with any EV, and that's mainly because brokers worry about the increased cost of accident repair with electric vehicles and about the possible need to replace the entire drive system battery if you were to be involved in a collision. Still, this Skoda is a great deal more affordable to insure than most of its direct rivals. A base rear-driven 62 kilowatt-hour Enyaq IV60 is rated at Group 23E. For an Enyaq IV80, it's Group 26E. For the all-wheel drive Enyaq IV80X Sportline, it's Group 32E. An Enyaq IV driver will enjoy lower maintenance costs than would be needed for a combustion model. Obviously no oil changes are required, and regenerative braking means that the brake pads are designed to last for the life of the car. There's a fixed servicing schedule with basic inspections after 2 years, unlimited mileage, and subsequent services every year or 18,750 miles. Skoda says that its aim is to make sure the battery pack lasts as long as the car too, and sure enough, the battery pack is warranted to have at least 70% of its usable capacity after 8 years or 100,000 miles. There's the usual unremarkable 3-year, 60,000 mile Skoda warranty. Only the 3rd year has a mileage limitation, and there's 12 years of body protection guarantee, a 3-year paint warranty, and 3 years of Skoda assistance, which includes European breakdown too. For us, the Enyaq IV represents a sweet spot in the family EV market, or at least it does in this Enyaq IV 60 form. In this guise, your EV buying or leasing proposition is supersized. The kind of money that would normally get you something family hatch shaped, here gets you a car sized more closely to models in the pricier class above. Yes, a few notable equipment features are missing to achieve that kind of value proposition, but it's still impressive. A Volkswagen ID4 sized model for the price of a little ID3, you might say, and you won't be too far wrong. Skoda's certainly made very good use of that same German engineering here, although it is annoying that the drive modes and the adjustable brake regeneration pedal systems which come with it are absent here, unless you pay extra or you choose the bigger battery. A typical Skoda customer might not mind that though, or the rather relaxed way that this car goes about its business on the road. These people may well value more this crossover's impressive cabin space, its superb ride quality, and the neat, simply clever practical features. They'll also like the excellent build quality, the accuracy of the range predictions, and the way that you can option up the cabin in a really classy way. The Enyaq IV is supposed to open up a fresh era for this Czech maker, and perhaps it does. Future EVs from this brand may well be a little more Skoda-like, but this one sets a trend we hope those forthcoming models will follow, that of offering more for less. It's an approach which has characterised this company for as long as we can remember, and we're pleased it's being continued here. More importantly though, we think you will too.